Okay, we're going to start by making a shallow mid-ventral incision starting a little bit below the base of the neck. Shallow, not to cut all the way through just yet, all the way down the front to the base of the umbilicus and then around it. Down the leg and around the other side. Just through the skin. Now we're going to go back through the incision that we just made and begin to cut through the muscular layer. Again, down the mid-ventral ventral section of the pig. Careful not to cut through past the muscular layer. You're going to have to make a few passes in order not to destroy the tissue that we're going to be examining. We're going to have to cut through a little bit harder when we go through the sternum and the ribs. Being very, very careful. Definitely not going to have to go as hard or as deep when we're cutting through the abdominal cavities because there's no bones there. Nice and easy, and begins to open up for us. Alright, there's going to be quite a bit of liquid on the inside of the animal. We're going to go through and rinse some of that out before we begin the rest of our dissection. Okay, now we're going to go back through and begin to cut through the rest of that bone. There's the diaphragm. We're going to have to cut through that a little bit too. Be very careful when you're cutting through the bone. Here we can see that shiny covering, which would be the parietal pericardium around the heart and the parietal pleura around the lungs. We're going to begin to make another incision going down the front legs of the animal in order to be able to open up the pig for better view. Again, cutting through the skin first and then going back through and cutting through the muscle. It's going to make it easier for us to open up the thoracic cavity of the animal. Alright, that's the sternum, cutting through. Being very careful not to destroy blood vessels. Making several passes. You're going to have to saw through that sternum, just like that. Making several passes. Separating the ribs and the sternum from the thoracic cavity, and now we're opened up. And we're going to end up removing some of that bone so that we can examine the internal structures. Here we're cutting through the diaphragm a little bit so that we can continue to separate, cutting right through that diaphragm. Don't cut through it too much because we are going to go back through and examine it. Again, cutting through more bones. These would be the ribs. And the same thing to the other side, carefully separating. We've pretty much removed the parietal pleura. So now we can just see the visceral coverings of the organs. And this is what you see at this time upon opening up your pig. We're going to go over to the sink now and rinse out some of those abdominal juices, and then we're going to come back and cut through some of the ribs and remove some of those bones so that we can further open up the animal. Alright, we have rinsed out the juices that were in the abdominal cavity of the pig. And now what we're going to go ahead and do before we examine it further is make some lateral incisions in the pelvic region. We've already made those lateral incisions up here in the axillary region. What we have done also is tied a string to the umbilical vein so that we don't lose track of it as we're examining the pig. So go ahead and make your lateral cut right here around the pelvic region. Once again, being very careful not to cut all the way through on the first cut. Use your tweezers to help hold it so that you don't cut your fingers. And then just separate it. Right? I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I actually think I'm going to make another lateral cut around the thoracic region so that we can really get a good look. Going through the skin. And then coming back and cutting back through the muscular layer once again. This time we're going to get a very good look at the parietal peritoneum. You see this membrane right here? This covers the entire abdominal cavity. I'm going to go ahead and peel that back. Okay. Might be a little bit easier just to remove these flaps. And then maybe come and take your scissors and cut through the rib cage and remove some of this bone and tissue here. In order to get a really good view of our organ systems. Okay.